Hey guys, welcome back to X-Men Explained. Sko here. This is Shadowcat Part 2. So I have another video about Shadowcat which I highly recommend watching first. That's going to be the basics, and this video is definitely meant to build on that. So what I described in that previous video, strategy-wise, is the fact that if you end the hero phase in phased, then you have the ability to phased block an entire attack in the villain phase, and afterwards it'll flip you back to solid. If you just keep playing in a pattern that lets you end every hero phase in phased and block the villain's attack, you're going to do really, really well. This video is about going beyond that, so I call that level 1, is just ending in phased and being able to block one villain attack. Level 2 of playing Shadowcat is wanting to be in phased during the hero, during the player phase for some reason. So one reason you might want that is to thwart, like either with airwalk to get the 4 threat kicker, or to thwart like through a patrol or crisis. That's actually pretty easy to do, very similarly to level 1, because you can just do all of your stuff and end in phased and then thwart. So that's mostly what you're going to do most of the time you do that. A more difficult thing to pull off would be phased strike. If you want to pull off this attack while you're in phased to do the hero action, removing an attachment kicker, or if you have another attack that you really want to get through guard for some reason. Doing that is a lot more awkward because phased will kick you out of phased once you do that attack. So it means if you're ending in solid, or if you defend in the villain phase and therefore begin the player phase in solid, you need a total of 3 attacks, including phased strike, to be able to end up in phased. You need 1 attack to somehow get you into phased, then phased strike will be your second attack, which will force you back into solid, which means you need a 3rd attack if you want to end in phased to be able to phased block the next villain attack. If you can somehow end the villain phase in phased already, then you only need a total of 2. And anyway, that's level 2 of Shadowcat. What we're really here for is level 3, which is mostly a multiplayer thing, which is where you're going to block multiple villain attacks within phased across the villain phase. And it is possible to block a ton. So you can, as Shadowcat, you can come to a table and block the entire table's damage all the time, and it's crazy. And this video is about showing you how to do that. So the way I like to describe this is being able to pull off an entire phased block has 2 ingredients, basically. You need a way to get into phased, and you need a way to defend. So loosely speaking, you need an attack and a defense. So this all begins kind of assuming that you blocked it like the normal way. So you ended your hero phase, phased somehow, and then you defended somehow, and you end up in solid. So that was your first phase block. It's like relatively easy to do that, and that's all you need to do in solo. So this is about how to get additional phase blocks beyond that. So the first part is an attack, or more generally speaking, something to get you into phased again. The trick here is that not any attack will do. It needs to be something that you can actually pull off during the villain phase. So there are only a few options for that. Counterpunch is a fairly good one. After your hero defends against an enemy attack, you can deal damage to that enemy equal to your hero's attack. So this would have to be played after your defense. So after your defense, you would want to trigger phased response first. In fact, you have to because it's forced. And then you would play Counterpunch's non-forced response, which is itself an attack. And after you resolve Counterpunch, you get back into phased, which is our whole goal here. Another option is surprise attack. It can actually respond to the flip. So if your first defense flips you into solid, you can then spend that resource even on surprise attack, which is an attack. And then after surprise attack happens, you get back into phased. So ingredient number 1 is a way to get into phased. But once we're phased, we need ingredient number 2, which is a way to defend. And this takes many forms. One is any defense event that doesn't require you to exhaust. So some classic examples are Defiance, Sidestep, and Jump Flip. These are events with the defense label, which you can use to turn an attack against you into a defended attack. which means that will turn phased on and let you prevent all damage from it. The negative of these examples is they can only be used on attacks against you. Defiance says it has to be against you, and sidestep and jump flip require you to be about to take damage. So plan your turn well if this is happening, at whatever point in the phase the activations are actually against you is when you can use these. You don't want to load up with too many of them if your goal is to taunt attacks from other players. There are some defense events that do not require exhausting and can pull the attack from other players. Preemptive Strike is a classic example, although keep in mind that it's slightly conditional because you can't play it if the villain attack draws no boost icons. And then the absolute best one is Quick Shift, our absolute favorite card. This can pull an attack from any player, and if we play it in phase, not only does it make us defend and block all damage, but we can draw 2 cards, and it's crazy. And another more general way to be able to defend an additional time is a ready. But once again, kind of like attacks, not just any ready will do, it will have to be a kind of ready that you can pull off in the villain phase. So Ready to Rumble is probably the best and easiest one. It's really cool that you can leave it on the table stored, and then whenever you flip, so if your previous defense flips you into solid, you can respond to that with Ready to Rumble, and then you just need one of ingredient number 1 to get you into phased, and then you're ready to basic defend your next one. So that's the way that it provides both, the ingredient number 2. There's also other readies like Desperate Defense is a ready, kind of the same cost as Ready to Rumble, but you have to play it out of your hand. There are other similar options to Ready to Rumble that are just more conditional, basically, like Battle Fury or Indomitable could be used. They're basically just worse Ready to Rumble, so if you want 4 or more copies, I would advise going into those. So those are the 2 general categories. You need ingredient number 1 and ingredient number 2. So basically looking over your hand, for every pair of these things you have, you can block that many additional phased blocks. So if you're in a position to block 1 normally, like I would be here if I'm ready and phased, but I have 1 attack and 1 defense, then I can block a total of 2 attacks during this phase. If I have 2 attacks and 2 defenses, then I can block a total of 3 this phase. Anyway, something that really extends the way that we can block with these are these key cards over here. They're the multi-ingredients, the cards that can give us actually 1 of each, which makes them super good. So I'll start with Powerful Punch. I described this in detail in my first video, but you can play Powerful Punch even if you're exhausted and solid, okay? So that's where we're starting. Oh, we wouldn't be an alter ego. So let's say I did my previous defense, which will leave me in exhausted and solid. So in order to get another phase block, I need an attack and I need a way to begin defending. Powerful Punch gives me both of those things. So I can play it against an attack against any player. It'll taunt it to me. I will resolve Powerful Punch, dealing my damage to the enemy. After I attack, I go into phased, and then throughout the rest of the attack, I am defending. I therefore take no damage. And at the end of the attack, I flip back into solid because I have to. So that's how Powerful Punch gives us both ingredients number 1 and number 2. This is a situation where we might want to play Quick Shift with its first mode. Basically, the advantage of the first mode is that it lets us have both ingredients in 1 card. We much prefer to play it with the second mode just because we draw more cards, but if the thing that you're trying to do is get as many phased blocks in 1 villain phase as possible, then you use Quick Shift's first mode. So it doesn't require you to have an attack because Quick Shift itself will flip you into phased and it will also defend for you, so it provides both ingredients. Shadow and Steel, your team-up card, it of course has the drawback of requiring Colossus to be in play, so you need somebody to be playing the hero Colossus, or you need to have the ally Colossus somewhere in play. But it is even better than either of these because it actually can be thought of as providing 3 ingredients. For one thing, it is an attack very similar to, and also a defense very similar to Powerful Punch, so you could use it basically as Powerful Punch, either as your first copy if you're not in aggression or in protection, or as your 4th copy. You could play it from solid, it will flip you into phased, and then you'll get a phased block, and then you'll be done. But it's even better than that if you just don't flip in the first place. So if you play Shadow and Steel when I'm exhausted and solid, so I need both ingredients to get another flip, I'm going to resolve Shadow and Steel, do my attack damage to the enemy, and at that point I have the opportunity to flip. The key is just don't flip there, because Shadow and Steel itself will prevent all damage from that attack. So it basically gives you an entire phased block in that sentence. So because I've played Shadow and Steel, I could even use Solid to pay for it. I stay in Solid, but I block that entire attack. Then after Shadow and Steel, I then choose to flip from Solid into phased. So that's how it gave me 3 ingredients, because now I'm already phased. So to pull off yet another phased block in this same villain phase, I don't need ingredient number 1, a way to get into phased. I just need ingredient number 2, a way to defend again. So that's pretty awesome. It is also pretty useful if you want to be in phased during the hero phase, like at the beginning for some reason, like especially if you're trying to do, if the villain has gnarly attachments and you got to do the phased strike thing, because if you can start the player phase in phased, then you only need a total of 2 attacks to cycle back into phased eventually. But anyway, Shadow and Steel, super good. It's the only triple ingredient that's available to you. And then kind of as an honorable mention that isn't exactly one of these ingredients is Never Back Down. It is just really easy for you to trigger, because if you play this during any phased block, you will take no damage, therefore you will stun the enemy. So a lot of builds that are like really built around blocking multiple attacks for the table might be including Never Back Down in that kind of equation. And so if you really want to rack up the number and say like, oh, I can block 4 villain attacks, 5 villain attacks or more, a lot of those are including Never Back Down's stun as like yet another way to extend the number of times that you can block villain phase attacks. So I hope this is helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, reach out in the comments or on Discord. I hope you guys have fun out there being Shadowcat and blocking all the damage for your entire table forever and ever. Peace.